Morning, everyone. Welcome to our humble abode for A Better Way of Life podcast. Now, we must let you know right at the beginning of this episode that we have our heaters on, and we're not ashamed of that at all. You know, some podcasts, they turn their heaters off. They suffer in silence all the way through because they're worried that you might hear the odd click in the background. We don't care. We are keeping ourselves warm whilst we're doing this. In fact, only 2 minutes ago, Marianne had her, what do you call it, Udi?
Yeah,
on.
I feel I should just, because actually what I want is people to send their pictures in of theirs, because
yes, well then you have to wear it. Now, our special guest today is the wonderful Kirk Shortland, and I'm going to have to ask Kirk, do you have one of these as well? Do you own one of these?
Do you know what? I hate to admit it, I do, but it is buried now at the back of the wardrobe. It never comes out. My wife treated me to one when COVID sort of first came out, and I had COVID. I was quite poorly and struggled to maintain body heat, so I did live in it quite a lot. And it did have, I can't remember what it had on it, something like avocados or something very random. Not something I would have picked myself, but yeah, I've definitely had nudie. The kids have still got theirs, and they got, I think one's got garlic bread on, and one's got corgis on the other one. So yeah, you know, for all occasions. But no, they're brilliant for keeping warm.
Send your pictures. It's better than onesies, because onesies aren't good when you need the loo. Slightly
100%.
easier for a man, very difficult for a woman. And dressing gowns are just a bit old-fashioned now, aren't they? Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to put out an appeal. I'm going to put out an appeal because I'm Udi-less at the moment. So if there's anyone watching that actually produces these or sells these or whatever, and they just want someone to model one, I'll be happy to model. I'll be happy to take photos. I will appear in it on this program in different weeks. But please do, just let me know. I'll send you one.
I'm taking off. I've got my heater on, so I'm hot.
There you go. We don't want to overheat the studio.
I've got colours on. I've got a podcast colour on. So I've been out running.
You have.
Very nice.
Works well with what we're going to talk to with Kirk. So
this week you've actually ordered the T-shirts as well.
They're coming today.
They're coming today. So very shortly we will have proper A Better Way of Life T-shirts as well. And we're going to be making those available. If people want to buy one, then do let us know. Now, Kirk, before we dive into what it is that you actually do, I've got to ask, because you have an axe above your head, sir, which is kind of both intriguing but frightening at the same time. Is this a hobby? I tried axe throwing for the very first time.
I do that.
A month or so ago, discovered I was actually really good at it. I hit the bullseye 3 times in a row with 3 axes, which was
nice.
Was great. Yeah,
very impressive.
But what's the meaning of the axe?
Yeah, it's not a secret hidden talent or anything like that. I'm not like the national champion for axe throwing or anything exciting like that. It's from my time in the fire and rescue service. So when you leave the fire and rescue service, sometimes if you've sort of done enough years of service, your colleagues will chip in and they'll get you a mounted axe. So
you get axed.
You get axed, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Remove it from your shoulder blades, but it's you'll be able to see it. But it's got like there's a tally on there, which is sort of reminiscent of a bit of kit that is synonymous with the fire service, and the sort of the badge, if you like, as well of the service I worked for. So yeah, it just sits above the wine rack. And yeah, to be honest, I get asked that question quite a lot. Some people think it's a hammer. Some people think it's, like I said, something fascinating, but it's just for like.
I'm hoping it doesn't fall on the wine then.
Oh, it's well up there. Don't worry. Yeah, the wine is safe, hence the cage that it lives in.
I think everyone should have something like an axe in their home as a little bit of a sort of centerpiece, that a talking piece that gets the conversation going. I mean, look at how many people go to the shop. I won't name them because we don't want to get sued, but go to the shop and buy the same art as everybody else in the country and put it on their wall. It's great when someone has something a little bit different on their wall that,
I need something behind me.
Well, you've got a gonk. You've
Well,
got a
no,
gonk
that
above
needs
your
to
head.
go. I've got a new sofa in my logo colours, but I need something on that wall. So
Okay, so well, there's another appeal to put out to people. If you can paint in this kind of teal and pink, and you know, you could do a lovely painting. We could feature that on the wall as well. It's great, isn't it? If you ask, you just get things for free. So Kirk, tell us a little bit more about you, sir. So you had time in the fire service. What is it you're doing now?
Yeah. So I guess ultimately I've always worked in kind of business services, with a large chunk of that being in recruitment, and I've had some interesting sort of bits to go alongside that. I guess really, I had like a 7-year hiatus where I worked as a funeral director, and that was very interesting, and working with bereaved families. It's certainly something I didn't think I'd ever sort of get into, but kind of circumstances dictated that I kind of had that experience. And then I
was that
returned.
after the fire service?
Sorry.
Was that after the fire service?
No, that was as well as. So I worked in kind of business services roles, and then so predominantly recruitment based, either on site with a client or providing a range of solutions. 7-year gap where I was a funeral director, and then alongside all of that, I had this operational role with Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Service. So I was a crew commander, so I sort of got in charge of incidents up to a certain size, and I did that for sort of 15 years, and decided to leave that role at the end of 2022. And since then, if not a bit before, really, I've kind of been focusing on my training role that I have with Cogito HR. So it's been really useful. I've kind of been able to take all of these quite unique experiences and kind of put them together. And I think that's probably what makes my offering a bit more, if you like, interesting, because it's, I can bring a wealth of experience from some very different, places that a lot of people wouldn't have necessarily been exposed to. So, I'm quite thankful for those experiences, I guess, if you like.
Yeah, interesting. Now, listen, very quickly before we go more into the HR side of things, given the area that you were in the fire service, because I'm in Somerset, were you ever in any carnivals down here in your fire truck?
No, sadly not. I've got ex-colleagues that are very active members of the Bridgewater Carnival community, but sadly, sort of down this neck of the woods, it's kind of died off. I mean, I'm in Somerset as well, just outside of Yeovil, and there hasn't been a Yeovil Carnival course since I was a boy, so many years ago, probably a good 30 years. So no, I'm afraid not.
Oh, you have to come over to Chard next time. We've got one,
Yeah, Chard's got a good carnival. Yeah, I have been to the carnival. I've not partaken in it.
Oh,
I'll
invite you over next time. Next time we're having it on. For people that don't know what carnival is, literally we have massive floats, which must take hours and pounds to put together, with lots of flashing lights, people dancing or standing still. That's the ones that really get me. The ones where literally they stand still for hours and hours. And then there's smaller floats as well. Lots of major directs these days as well. Lots of people twirling their batons.
The world needs things like that, don't it? We seem to be losing all this kind of stuff, and it's nice.
Yeah, we need.
Yeah,
what we need is more community stuff. Absolutely. So, what is it in terms of your experience that you feel that you're really bringing into the HR community?
Well, I mean, I work predominantly in the sort of training division, if you like, of our business, Graham. So I spend a lot of my time working in and around mental health and well-being and workplace well-being. And I think that working in those quite dynamic working environments just brings you a different lens to sort of view things through. And I think that having gone through PTSD myself, I was diagnosed with PTSD in around 2018. I think when you go through a diagnosis like that and you start to come to terms with what that kind of looks and feels like, you go on this real growth journey. And I think that, if anything, I wouldn't say I look at my life in 2 stages now, but there definitely was kind of like a pre-PTSD, and then there's been a post-PTSD version of me. And I think that, the kind of feedback I get from a lot of the courses I deliver is that, being able to give that account of, what does it look and feel like when you're the person that sticks your hand up for support and you've never done that before? What does that look and feel like? How were you treated? How did people interact with you? I had some time off of work. What was it like when I returned to work? Was I treated the same? Was I treated differently? And I think that those kind of experiences, help people relate with kind of where they are in their own journey. It is that classic, that analogy of, we're all in the same storm, but on different ships, and you kind of get to your destination when you get there, right? So I think that that's been quite useful. And my courses tend to be, I guess the conversation drives it in a direction that actually it encourages other people to share. And we do kind of find that most of our courses do fit that demographic of 1 in 4 adults will have a mental health condition or a problem in a 12-month period, and quite often that tends to be the case.
Would you say that still too much emphasis is placed on sort of being reactive when it comes to mental health within organizations as opposed to being proactive? Because I just think that a lot of organizations, they maybe part of the problem is that people don't feel that they can talk about their mental health prior to taking a job or at interview, etc. And maybe that needs to change as well. And there needs to be kind of more reassurance that it's, you're not going to get discriminated against if you've got, a mental health condition. But also, it's almost like it suddenly comes up within an organization, and then it's like, oh no, what are we going to do about this? As opposed to proactively telling, putting into place a culture and a set of solutions and creating an atmosphere where people can talk about how they are on a day-to-day basis. It's like we all keep quiet about this, and then it suddenly blows up, and now what are we going to do about Jim? Do you know what I mean? Is that the problem?
Yeah, I think there's many layers to that question. I think that I find myself kind of nodding along to parts of that question, and I think you're right. I think that coming out of COVID, there was a lot of great work done in the sense of a lot of businesses have kind of looked at where their gaps are, and they followed the guidance, and they've employed or they've trained mental health first aiders, and that's great. That's a huge positive, and it's a step in the right direction. Where it kind of falls over for me a little bit is that that's quite a big role, and it's the kind of role that you need to make sure that when you're putting your hand up and volunteering from that, you're the right kind of person that can support that organization, and importantly the individuals who need that signposting. Okay, and I think that we kind of live, or we kind of view the workplace as supporting mental health and well-being, but purely in that kind of responsive phase. And I kind of think if you break it down into 3 areas, there's kind of 3 key areas for me. And when we support our clients with the training that we offer, we talk a lot in this narrative, because you've got ultimately this response piece, which is where people, ultimately kind of reach the end of their capacity. They need support. They need that pretty quickly. And whether that's, a counselling service, a telephone number, a GP point, whatever that looks like, that's kind of where we are. And you've kind of got this response sector. By having a mental health first aider, we're kind of moving into this prevention piece where, we want to be that barrier for the business and for the person, that before they kind of reach that, if you like, disaster zone for them, there's an opportunity to have a conversation. And that's where, for me, mental health first aiders fit really well. And it's that kind of buffer that gives that person the opportunity to say, look, I'm not feeling mentally well at the moment. I've got a low level of mental well-being. I understand that it's my responsibility to own that. And, I want to take actions to drive my direction of travel through that. But for me, the key stage of this is the first stage, and it's the education piece. And this is a piece where I think businesses are starting to now look at this and understand that if I give more people in my organization exposure to the awareness of mental health and well-being, that's going to build their resilience. As an organization, we're going to then start to understand that we're empowering people to build their own support networks. And actually, rather than getting to this prevention stage or the end of this prevention stage where we're engaging the mental health first aid team, we're actually having a lot of those conversations more naturally anyway. And we're actually talking about the things in our peer groups that maybe can, avert that kind of growing arms and legs in the future. I talk a lot about the mental health continuum, and it's basically about understanding that, you're going to have really good levels of mental well-being. You're going to have low levels of mental well-being, and you might have a diagnosis or you might not. But understanding that you can kind of move between those kind of 4 areas is key, because we're all going to have those major stresses in our life, right? So, we're all going to suffer bereavement, sadly. We might have financial problems at work, relationships that break down, and they're big, major stress doses. So that's going to affect how I'm feeling in any given day. But understanding that actually I can be responsible and have the tools to navigate that, if I get the right level of education and awareness, will set me up for, better well-being down the road.
Marianne, I was going to bring you in on that, because when you're training people, do you find, and there's a toing and froing in terms of dialogue, etc., as part of that process, do you find that people suddenly open up to you about maybe a lack of being able to talk about these things either within their organization, or not knowing where they can talk about mental health, or using their experiences when it comes to other stakeholders, maybe clients, or outside of the organization? Is there still kind of a, well, yeah, but am I allowed to talk about this when it comes to a sales situation, for example?
Yeah, I think what I tend to see, people are quite shocked. I say shocked. I don't know how you found it, Kirk, when I trained you. I think you're really good at what you do anyway, so you probably didn't necessarily need a lot. But that people seem surprised. I'm very open about. It's interesting you said about that pre and post. That I often say to people, the me before, me after kind of thing, and people probably think, oh gosh, but it is, because it was such a moment that and actually that then informed how I delivered that training. And so for me, it becomes, I think these days are wonderful for mental health. I think they're great. I lost my dad to suicide. I think they're wonderful, but I don't think it's a bit reactive in a way. But actually, if you can get people to feel comfortable, so for me, I feel that I never set out for this, would be that by being a role model, and probably much the same as you are, Kirk. And it's not something I try to do. I don't try to do it. I just go and be me. And that people do come to me saying an awful lot. Even just last week, I was with the fire service last week, Kirk, which you might have seen, when I was very brave. Somebody came to me and said they were just waiting to go through a diagnosis for ADHD. And I never set out for that, but I know that I never realised I probably did have mental health problems, but I now know that they weren't actually the root cause of it. It was living with something I didn't know that I'd had. And so for me to be able to own what I am and just show that you just be you, it doesn't matter, that people then will feel naturally more comfortable to not only come and speak to me, but then when they go back, because I'm teaching them to go and train other people, that it becomes that ripple effect, but also that culture change. And so I often have conversations about this. Where does that culture change start? Is it management? I don't really know. It's HR. Don't really know what HR does, Billy. But actually, if you can get with it being with that training, you're capturing people, and then it just becomes a way. It just becomes a way of being, that it's okay to, I mean, you've seen what my sessions are like, Kirk. They're pretty much the same as yours are, despite the fact that's not what my sessions actually are as such. But it's about people just being able to be comfortable. And there's very many people that, George that was on your course, Kirk, that he said it was life-changing. I saw him the other week, and, his colleagues I taught, and they said, what did you do to him? We're talking about a very manly man. You know,
Yeah.
you met him, very manly man. But also he'd
Yeah.
opened up to me about his mental health as well since then, and was very open about it. And I think he would be to other people about. And I think it's wonderful then to be able to create that environment for people to be able to feel comfortable, to be able to look and for people to say, "God, Marianne, you look really normal. I can't believe that you'd have that." And I said, "Well, A, what's normal, and B, what isn't?" You know, it's, but yeah, people do still seem quite shocked, and I hear what different organisations are like, and unfortunately, things still do need to massively change. You know, when people are told you have to deliver training in this way, that kind of tells me a bit about where they work is. You have to do this and you have to do that, and there's no negotiation with this. And probably for you, Kirk, you see that says a lot about, I think, the management or the style of that. I don't know what you think, but
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that we kind of get blinded by the stigma, don't we? You know, and if you look at it from a business perspective, you know, because we've never, this has been accelerated, I guess, since the pandemic. Okay, we know that the pandemic's had there's been a major factor with regards to people's mental health and well-being. But ultimately, stigma is kind of, it's that barrier that gets in the way to all of this. Because if I think about my own personal situation, you know, I put my hand up for support 18 months before I got support, and then I retracted it. And the reason I retracted it was because, you know, I was really concerned about maybe, you know, what my colleagues would say. You know, bear in mind I had sort of multiple employers because I had a main employer and obviously the fire service. You know, I didn't want it to become a problem at either of those working places for me, or at home, or with my children. And, you know, because of stigma, because of how I thought society was going to view me and that condition, because I'd equated myself to that condition, I did what I did was sit on my hands ultimately, and I didn't get the support I needed. And then 18 months later, you know, the whole world kind of came crashing down. So I think that that's a big part. And I think that what's so powerful with the training that I've delivered is that I always find that, sort of similar to the example that Marianne gave around George, who, you know, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying, it was very much sort of, you know, a man of a particular sort of genre and age, and is probably perceived in a certain way. I had a gentleman very similar, actually, from a manufacturing background on one of my courses about 4 or 5 weeks ago. When I go around the room, we always have a bit of an introduction, and we talk about kind of, you know, what would you like to get out of this? You know, maybe why have you ended up sort of sat here today? And he sort of said, look, you know, I'm from that generation of where, for me, it's just, you know, man up, take 2 man up pills and call me in the morning. And, you know, he certainly wasn't standoffish. He was a very kind of approachable guy. But he was similar to George. He was the biggest change within those 2 days. And since then has kind of radiated that change through his workforce to the point where people do say, you know, cannot believe the change in that individual.
Isn't it? It's incredible though, isn't it? It for me, hearing and watching him talking to his colleagues, and a man who, again, he wouldn't mind me saying, that hadn't done anything since school. And we're talking, I don't know how old he is, I haven't asked him, but that said, nobody's believed in me nobody had ever believed in me, and I wanted to make you proud. And I think, whoa, that's like massive. And then to see then somebody who then goes and works in a very manly environment, because it's in the drainage sector, who said, once upon a time I'd have been the man up, shut up, probably to them. He said, but now I step back and remember and realize that those people are people who have got stuff and baggage and whatever. And that it's almost like, although you're there to teach them about that thing that you're there to teach them about, whatever it is, using a machine or whatever, that actually it's not just about that. It's, you know, I had someone a while ago that I was teaching and found out partway through that person's marriage had broken down literally a few weeks before. Then something else happened. So I'm negotiating all of that in my training session and having to realize that first and foremost, that was the most important thing. We can negotiate. I know that it's going to take them longer to get through, but you can't just put that on the shelf for a bit.
No.
It's the same as going to work. You can't just, as you walk out that door, and I've seen it even, within that sector, the drainage sector, that people say, I've seen people talk about when people are late. I read an article somebody said yesterday, and it was about the being late, and that you've got the people that can't stand it and the people that can't help it, and that there's two sort of different people, and these people are like, there's no excuse for it, blah blah blah. And I said, but you don't know the reasons, you don't know what's happened to that person before. You don't know. They might be looking after, they might be caring for somebody, something might have happened on the way to work, they may have had a row with someone, but anything might have happened, and they say, well, they just need to get on with it. And I'm you can't, that ultimately,
we've got to stop putting templates on people, haven't we? We've got to stop putting templates on the way, the process by which we deal with people as well. And bringing this back to sort of Kirk's area, this HR has needed this, hasn't it? HR has needed to shift, really, because I think for years, a lot of people's view of HR is that the HR people are in bed with the management, and we can't really trust those HR people, but it's needed to shift its position to show that it's a bridge, and that actually it now sits in the right place. And I think that's really important. I when I spoke to Kirk before we came on to do this, I said to him, I dealt with, when I was still doing my workplace assessments, somebody that had PTSD, and the company, who shall remain nameless, who asked me to go and do the assessment, gave me a bit of a afterwards, because I spent 4 hours with the guy, right? And one of the things was, well, we do these assessments within half an hour, and it's like, we can't determine when we turn up to see somebody and their need is such, we can't determine that's what we're going to spend. That's how we're going to do this. We're going to do this with this process, and we're going to tick the boxes. Because fundamentally, part of the problem also comes that a lot of the time that person probably hasn't told us everything beforehand, so we don't know in the triage or in the step of the process what we're actually completely dealing with. But any of us who are professionals in those situations need to actually allow more time for the unexpected, which I think is one of your posts.
It is, because once you've opened the floodgates, and once you've opened those floodgates, it would be harmful, irresponsible, all of those things to just, and I've had it before, when you've been in counselling sessions, and that when someone's slyly looking at their watch, and then you're like, well, it's something I do want to talk about is, and it's something that came up the other day that I was talking, and it is a big thing, and I think, Kirk, you'll have seen it an awful lot. I see it a lot. Being female, I see a difference. Is this male and female difference with handling things, and that whole perception of, and someone highlighted it perfectly to me at the weekend, that you've got, and I thought, wow, this is partly what maybe some of the not issue. So if we look at the fact that, and you'll know the statistics more than me, that I can't remember what they are, but that more women attempt suicide, but they don't actually, I don't like the word succeed, but it doesn't, I don't know what the word is.
Complete.
Complete, that's the word, yeah. They don't complete, whereas males, there's a higher rate. And I think there's quite a lot in there that when I see me being a female and knowing that I speak to, or would have done, even when my son was younger and he was ill, that I was at home with him all the time, and I really wasn't in a very good place. I remember sitting on the floor crying, just like, I can't do this anymore. I've got a child that's attached to me. I was feeding him, but I knew that I could speak to my friends about that. Nobody could necessarily fix it, but you know, I had people I could speak to. But men, and still, I speak to many men about this, and they go, well, you just kind of don't really. And then someone said to me at the weekend about how men tend to have things in boxes. So it'll be the work box, the family box, the sports box, the everything else. And women have a box with all of it in, and it's all going around. And then that kind of explained to me quite a lot of why I can't switch off from needing to clear this up or do this, or I'm at shops and I go, oh, it's someone's birthday, let me go and put that in the present drawer. Whereas men will tend to be, oh crap, it's someone's birthday, I better put a tenner in a card and go and get a card on the way. And you're both smiling because you know that this is true. Women have present drawers. Women do have present drawers. It's a thing. But there does seem to be this thing about the fact that men feel like, and yet for some reason people feel that they can tell me stuff. I think it's probably because I own who I am. They would feel really comfortable telling me. And in the session with you, Kirk, there was quite a lot of males in that. People opened up. And I say to people, but what happens then when you're with your mate? Oh, can't possibly tell them. Couldn't possibly. What is this all about? And can that change?
I like your analogy. I see the value in that, and I agree with that, Mariam. I think that the box analogy is great because absolutely we're very good at compartmentalizing things. I think that where we fall over a little bit as a species, and Graham might agree with me, is that we're not very good at sharing what's in our individual boxes, and we're really poor at linking the boxes together. Okay, and having a process that defines where things go in each box. So it's a bit of a mess. And again, I think, sort of stigma is a big part of that as well. And we are really poor at talking. And if I think about the professions that I've come through and the environments I've worked in, you know, I worked in the fire service, which obviously is different station on station, but on my station, we were predominantly, you know, white between the ages of 30 and 55, probably. And your background and experiences would dictate kind of how you make and inform those decisions. And if we were to look at, you know, a genogram for every individual, and we looked at who the key adult relationships are in their life between the ages of, you know, 0 and 8, and who those key adult influences were, we would understand more about why we make decisions and we have views in the way we do. And that's obviously starting to shift because we are now much more open, if you like, in society, and we are more probably curious about our thinking. So I think therefore we are becoming more open, but we're kind of fighting against that wave of time in a sense of, you know, we don't talk about this because we've never talked about it. And in this country particularly, we're really poor at talking about, you know, mental health and well-being, sex, sexual orientation, finances, bereavements, all that kind of stuff. We kind of shrink up, don't we? And we don't want to.
Stiff upper lip.
100%.
Interestingly, last week, because I was saying I was I was in Haddenham with Buckinghamshire Fire Service. I went in the turntable ladder, about 30 meters.
Oh, yeah, how'd you find that?
I did it. I hate heights, but I'm also very stubborn, and I didn't want to turn down the opportunity. So they were very, very good with me. But also what I did notice, and again, I was talking about this at the weekend, was that, and I always see this, and I think I'm a bit of a bloke, kind of, this whole box business. I think I quite like a big box with the little boxes, and this is what it would work well if we had a big box and we had boxes that had little holes where we could see out and we could link them all up. Women don't do very well because I think they actually put all the boxes in, and they're their own worst enemy a lot of the time because they also are a bit, I need to do it all, hand up. I totally hold that up as well. But what I do see often is that women kind of talk about stuff, but I don't. There's some women that I've had support from, you know, I'm self-employed, but a lot of them that, I don't know, men, they do all the what's it called? Banter. And again, I saw it last week and I observe it, and quite often I feel a bit envious really, because I quite like that, because actually, you know, they always say when you're at school that the one you take the mick out of the most is the one that you like the most, don't they?
Yeah. And
I kind of saw that, and I really love it when blokes have nicknames for each other. That they're sometimes a little bit what's the word? Not very nice, but actually, what you really see is that when men when the chips are down, men really are there for each other. And it's funny how it's perceived that women are supportive to each other, but there's times I've had really nastiness from women, actually, when I've needed help, really when I've needed help. And yet I think when men do finally break down, it's almost like everybody around them goes, wow, they've opened up. And it's that permission then for me to. I've heard somebody I spoke to recently, their marriage had broken down, and quite a few people actually. And then when those men speak up to their friends, they say, don't hide it, don't suffer in silence. And then they've said that their friends then came forward, and everybody's trying to pretend that everything's okay. For what? For society.
Yeah. Should we talk about when the chips are down? Because I think that's a really interesting point. And if I think about when you were saying that, Marion, what I started to think about was my support network that I feel that I've got. And when my chips were down, I guess you really find out kind of where your relationships are with people and to what kind of depth you would have, trust people. And I've got two friends in particular who wouldn't have been people I thought would become my major support network, but boy, did they. And they know how eternally grateful I am to them for their time and for their ears. And for their support. And they were a huge part of me kind of returning to a good level of mental well-being. And, they both keep in contact with me regularly. I will go and have a beer socially with one every couple of months, if not every month. And I recognize that works for me. And I recognize what works well for me when I'm feeling like my wellness is kind of dipping. And again, some of those friends that I thought would really be there, or those relationships I thought people would be there, they weren't, and they didn't get it, and it wasn't necessarily a failing on their part. It was just, again, that they kind of have these decisions that they make based on their experiences that don't interline with kind of where I was in that particular space. And
I think people think they've got to fix things.
Yeah.
I know for me being female as well, quite often people say to me, "Oh, you cope with everything, don't you?" And I think, "Oh, not really, but yeah, I'll just keep going." And I think sometimes women are, as mums, and again, I am stereotyping here, but women are going around being super women, doing what they're doing. And then when you say I'm struggling, they kind of then back off because they're like, I haven't got any answer because I'm drowning over here too. And
but also there's a complexity in relationships, even support network relationships, which perhaps we don't necessarily think about. And I often see it just in sort of things like random posts on LinkedIn, for example, which is that we kind of make assumptions that people are standalone in their world and in the way that they act in the world and the way that they perceive the world. But actually, if those people are in relationships, then actually part of the way they react to things, part of the way that they think about things, respond to things, is to do with the other relationships that they're in, and how they inform that. So it may be, for example, Kirk, that some of the friends that you thought may be the ones that would stand up and help you, whatever, might not have even been them that may inform those decisions. It might have been the fact that their partner, their or their family situation or whatever, people were saying, well, I feel for them, but I don't want us to go into that situation.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So I think sometimes we need to understand that broader.
I tend to know. I try for me with people. I even having, I remember losing my dad. I hadn't really lost anyone before that, and there was nothing anybody could ever say to make it right because I couldn't, and I've always remembered that. And so I think a lot of people don't volunteer to be a support because they think, oh my gosh, I can't be all that, so I won't be anything. We were talking about this in relationships with, couples. I'm saying women, how when women don't want this or that they will struggle to communicate that to a male because a male's got a different way of looking at it. And that actually sometimes we don't want all of this. And actually the person that's asking or going, I'm struggling, doesn't want you to fix it. that they don't even know what fixing it would be. It just to be able to, and I've done it before with you, Graham. I've rung up, I've spoken to you, and I'm like, and you can't fix it necessarily. A lot of the things you can fix, but some of the things you can't fix. But just getting it out there, it's out then. And so now quite often I will, if somebody does open up to me, or I'll say, look, you can speak to me. I said, even if it's just you send me a message, I probably can't do anything, but just the fact you've shared it. So I think if we could all be a little bit more open about showing that we can accept, even if we can't fix, then people might feel a bit more able to share that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think when I think about how I deliver my courses, I talk all the time around, the most important person in the room at any given time is you, right? Okay. And then if you look at it from kind of like an emergency services perspective, as the casualty, when you phone 999, you think that you're kind of it kind of is built around you, and it is ultimately built around you as the casualty. But in terms of who's the most important person in that situation, the casualty comes fourth or fifth, because me as the individual, then my team, then my colleagues that I'm working with, will put the procedures in place to kind of affect, the situation for that person. But when I'm delivering my mental health training, regardless what level I'm training, I talk all the time about this. You're the most important person in the room. You are responsible for your direction of travel with this. And we can give you the tools. We can teach you, the way to kind of look at yourself. But having that awareness that actually you're kind of controlling that destiny is really important, because I think that try to encourage moving away from this maybe perceived narrative of it's the responsibility of the workplace or my husband or wife or whatever it may be. Actually, no, it kind of is on you, because all of that will come and go, but you are responsible for kind of that direction of travel. And it's important to check in with yourself regularly. And you can do a form of self-assessment where you kind of look at your last 12 months and go, actually, I recognize that over that last 12-month period, I might have suffered a bereavement or a loss or a change of circumstances or something at work. And actually, there's quite a high stress association with those transitions. But that was that last 12 months. If I come forward 6 months, or maybe look at kind of where I'm going to go and how can I direct kind of what works for me, and to make sure that those transitions over the next 6 to 12 months are, less intense for me.
Do you find that you're, I don't know, Graham, you speak to a lot of people as well. I don't think a diagnosis is everything. It is and it isn't, because I know for a lot of people, they're not going to, for whatever reason. For me, with the neurodiversity, I was very fortunate that through my husband's work, I had that. Does it ultimately make a difference? Well, yes, I have it, so I can't say anything, but that's why I share, and you're probably the same, because ultimately, if you identify that that's how you feel, and you own, like you said, if you own those feelings, then it's what you do with it afterwards. And so much like you, much like me, like for you, Graham, things you've gone through, if you own that, then you can, like for me, I always talk about the fact I changed my audience. The audience that I was putting myself in front of wasn't. If they were an audience that were going to heckle me, then you weren't for me, So you change that. And whether that's in the workplace, that people are working somewhere that quite often they talk about toxic workplaces. Well, is it that the workplace is, or is it just that didn't work?
I don't know whether, because we're talking about labels here in a way, I don't know whether labels in themselves are 100% helpful. I think knowledge is helpful. And I think, for some people, that knowledge is liberating as well. So I think actually for some people, knowing this is what this is, when, when I didn't know what it is.
I was given a manual. I was given the manual for the right head. So
I've never sought a diagnosis for me being me, but for me that's fine, because ultimately the way that I see the world, and actually ultimately the way that I see the solution to this as well for everybody. And when I was going to do workplace assessments, I didn't care about the label in a way. What I cared about was what are the issues? what are the problems, what are the things that this person needs help with, right? And therefore, ultimately, it's a bit like the male female conversation. I think we can learn from having conversations about, do men struggle with this, or do women struggle with this, and having those gender-based conversations. There will be some people listening that go, well, yeah, but actually I'm a man and I don't have those, I don't think that way. And there will be women that, and they go, oh, well, I don't think that way. That's fine. But I think having conversations about difference and how different people think and feel and what different people need are important. And I think whatever knowledge you can pull from that should then inform your action. And that's the important thing.
I mean, it's all exploded in the. I mean, for me, I didn't know anybody. Well, I didn't know anybody that was diagnosed with it as a female, which is. I work with kids with ADHD, and potentially I've autism as well. But and I'm much the same as with you, Kirk. I think for me, I had that, and it answered a lot of questions. But ironically, a bit like you said, I don't want it to have to be that somebody has to have that to be okay. I love who I am now. I didn't before that, but that diagnosis meant that I was able to go, whoa, I'm not rubbish. I'm not all those things I'd heard. And I think things are changing. I think they're massively changing. And I don't cringe quite so much now when I say I've got it, because there was that for a while, people saying, oh, everybody's a bit this and a bit that. And my argument is, but if everybody's a bit ADHD, why is the world not a lot more favourable to in the way that it's? So I think things hopefully will start changing. And no, you shouldn't need. I don't think anybody should need that diet. I don't think anybody should because actually you could go to somebody else and there weren't enough boxes ticked, and then you didn't get that diagnosis. Does that discredit all of those feelings you had? No, because my son wasn't diagnosed with something that I know that he's got purely because of a lack of information from the part of the person that that didn't know him. So, but and that your approach to it is wonderful, Graham. And I said to you about my access to work, that I've now been given equipment that I've now got, and I've gone, this isn't actually what I wanted. This isn't actually what I needed. Because when I was given my occupational health assessment, they said to me, what do you need? And I thought, well, hang on a minute. I don't know. That's what you do. I don't know. So then they've said, I've now got a headset that I won't use because I don't wear headsets like that. So I said, then when I looked it up on the internet, I could have had earbuds, but nobody told me. Nobody told me I could have them. So I didn't know that it was an option. So.
And that comes back to me, that comes back down to the time thing. Right. And I think time is, I speak about time on lots of podcasts, but I honestly believe that time is the one element, and I'd love to hear Kirk's view on this, that we have completely still got wrong within business. Totally got the concept of time wrong. We talk a lot about, if you like, work-life balance, which I feel is a thing that is perhaps a myth. We talk about trying to get well-being and family life and work life all kind of together, etc. We talk about, making sure that we have well-being in the workplace, that we have mental health, etc. Talks within the workplace, but time is the bit that we miss out a lot of the time, because what we do is we tick box, or we force quick education onto people, but we don't give them the time to absorb that information, and we don't give them the time to actually react to that information. We're constantly trying to move on to the next thing. And the speed of everything these days is so quick. And that's where I tend to see the holes in all of this, is that everything has to fit into a process where it's like, oh, well, we've done that now. And now we're moving on to this.
And actually, if you move on to the next bit, it's like with teaching, isn't it? If you move on to the next bit without so I do those formative assessments. You move on. I mean, you'd be pleased to know this, Kirk. So when I went out last week I was teaching the AT, and they booked me for a week.
Nice.
And they actually did it well. And it was to do with the fact that actually to learn how to use that equipment would have cost £3,000 per person to go over to Germany to do it. So actually, the guy who is the manager, he's got PGCE, and this is the key to it, is you've got somebody involved in that training who gets it. So he said, I want you here for a week. So we did the teaching bit. They spent a day with the equipment, which when I went up, and they were learning from each other, because some of them, and then we did 2 micro teach days. One was the theory bit, because that's what they're going to do. And the other day was the practical one. And they gave feedback. And I just thought, wow.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And they had the time. And as soon as you have time.
Yeah, they made that time. And actually, consequently, what's happened is, because of the feedback they got from everybody, they then had the other side of the fire service then said, they've booked me now. And they've said moving forward, they're going to, with the JOs, the junior officers. And that's massive, apparently. They're actually seeing that worth in it, that if you educate people who can then educate other people well, then you've got a very educated, knowledgeable workforce who will stay, who will be happier, who will communicate with each other more, who then ultimately can do a better job and will, in terms of recruitment, can stay. They'll stay and they'll be happier.
It's a massively valid point, and I couldn't agree anymore. And I think that when you think of, from a business perspective, your employees are your biggest expenditure, aren't they? And they're your biggest cog in the machine of making everything work. And recruiting people, particularly in this market, is really hard. Retaining people is difficult. There's people are always being tapped on the shoulder about the next opportunity, because that's kind of the world we live in now, right? And I think that if you're going to invest in people, investing the time and the energy into creating people that are self-aware, able to understand what good mental health and well-being looks like for them, is kind of the cornerstone to a huge amount of this for me. And I think that if you were going to, people come to work and they spend a long time at work, right? I spend more time virtually nowadays with my colleagues than I do with my own family. So wouldn't it make sense if the whole of me is at work and I'm happy and I'm aware of where I am and I'm aware of the things that are going to drag me down? And this is the kind of conversation I have a lot with businesses who go, we think we want some mental health first aiders. It's actually a case of, well, actually, let's talk about giving everybody, some awareness and build some resilience, because that is how you get that cultural shift in the workplace. You move away from that toxic kind of environment that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Do
you know what? It's been a fantastic conversation today, isn't it? You need to go out and see. You need to go and see.
We were trying to find a time for me to. I'm not observing you. I'm observing you to see how you do it and how wonderfully you do it. On a side note, did it help you, having spent that time learning how? Because we see that there's companies put training on, but the people that do the training, it's just about get it out quickly. But did it help you then to be able to plan those sessions better?
Massively. And I think, I think I said to you when I came onto your course, I delivered training. I've always been involved in an element of training throughout, a lot of my roles, because I've been in, various sort of amount of management positions and that kind of stuff. So I've always been responsible for cascading training and kind of delivering that down the line, particularly in the fire and rescue service. You'll get pieces of, information you need to obviously then relay. So as confident as I was kind of coming in about knowing kind of my area and kind of how that works, going back and kind of underpinning that with, some rigor and some structure has allowed me to be more stretchy, more creative, because I've kind of got all of those bases covered. And I'll go into delivering a course, and my courses are much, they're better structured based on that time I had with you. And the cohort I was in, it was a very good cohort. There was, people of different experiences and abilities. And that was, again, really useful for me to kind of see. And for me, absolutely, it's made me, a far more productive trainer. And I get more out of my courses I'm delivering, and therefore my learners are getting more out of me, because I'm giving them the time they need because I'm not having to go back and underpin things that I've not shored up in the first place.
Well, you do those, the foundations are laid, aren't they? And if that bit, even though I do bang on about aims and objectives, but if that bit laid out properly, then like you say, you can then be more creative because you're not getting to the end of each session thinking, thank God that worked. I mean, to a certain degree you do, but it's not like hit and miss, like, oof, you can settle knowing that it's that structure's there, isn't it?
I think it allows me to manage my energy better because similar to kind of how you train, you know, I'm on my feet, you know, for 8 hours a day, how long that course may be. And obviously the topics I cover are very emotive. So I spend a lot of my time kind of directing energy and building energy and creating that dynamic. So yeah, knowing I've got those kind of bases covered with my structure has given me, you know, more ability to do that. So yeah, I will forever be thankful for that.
I have to go down and see you in action.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely get that jacked up.
You're a pleasure. You're a pleasure.
Thank you.
On that note, we're going to wrap it up because it's been such a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, Kirk.
Thank you.
My pleasure. It's been great. It's been great to spend some time with you both, and yeah, look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, it'd be great.
If you've been listening and you've been hearing the conversation, we'd like to invite you to carry on with the conversation as well. So please do get in touch if you've got something to say. If you feel like you've got a story to tell of your own that you'd like to come on and share sometime, we'd love to invite you into our little space to do it. I now need to look up the stickers so I can send Kirk a sticker. They're here. Send me your address, Kirk, and I'll send you.
Perfect.
I don't know what you're going to do with a photo of me and Marianne, but there they are.
As long as it doesn't involve an axe or any gun.
There you go. There's
Very
a lovely
nice.
vinyl
Yes,
sticker which you can stick somewhere appropriate.
But also don't forget looking for pictures of people in hoodies, and if anyone wants to start wearing one, your hoodie pictures, not. That will
change. Yeah, I mean that will change my my dress attire. I get sent music T-shirts by bands left, right, and centre. I think I've been sent 40 in the past 2 years, which is nice. So I don't ever have to buy T-shirts. But and I'm still looking for socks as well. If you know, just why not? Why not? It's just like I don't want to go clothes shopping. I just want people to send me
all your clothes. Yeah,
send me your clothes. Yeah, new ones, especially if it's underwear of any description. Please make sure it's new. I don't want any second hand. And on that note, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We look forward to doing this again soon. If you've enjoyed this, please do share it and let other people know. Let's bring other people into the conversation.